Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Boardwalktech blockchain webinar all about use cases. Today is April 18th, 2018. I am Andy Duncan with Boardwalktech, and I'm joined today by JB Coopy. Hello, JB.
Hello, Andy. Hello, everybody.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody, for the enthusiastic sign up for this particular webinar. Again, the agenda is we're gonna walk through kind of what is the essence of blockchain and where does Boardwalk fit with regard to that, and then we're going to walk you through 5 different use cases in different industries, showing various ways in which companies have actually implemented the Boardwalk blockchain, and then we're going to do a webinar, or excuse me, we're going to do a demo, and JB will walk us through that. And during the session, feel free to send your questions in, and we'll be monitoring those questions, and hopefully at the end of the session, we'll have a chance to answer some of those questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So who is Boardwalk? So Boardwalk was founded in 2005. We're based in Cupertino, California, and also Mumbai, India. We have developed a patented solution for enterprises to adopt blockchain technology. We kind of like to say that we were blockchain before they called it blockchain. And part of that is the fact that Boardwalk actually delivered the first digital ledger to market in 2007. And the digital ledger is the core of what a blockchain solution is all about. We currently have quite a number of the Fortune and Global 500 as customers today. You can see some of the customers on this particular slide, including longtime customers like Levi's and Coca-Cola and Apple and PricewaterhouseCoopers. So various types of companies that are utilizing the Boardwalk blockchain in various industries. Why is everybody talking about blockchain? Why is this getting so much press? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that today in the enterprise, it is very difficult to exchange information, especially multi-party transactional type of information. While we have protocols established for things like email, where we all have an email client and we all have an email server that we connect to with our companies, the issue is that there really has never been a protocol for exchanging information, both inter and intra-company for an enterprise. And we believe, and many other people believe this as well, that blockchain has the potential of actually becoming that protocol, of actually becoming the environment by which people can, enterprises can exchange data and information more easily and with the security and the trust that is required for enterprise-to-enterprise transactions. There's certainly a lot of hype about this. We're obviously a very big proponent of blockchain, but we think it's still to be determined whether this ends up being the protocol of all time, but it certainly, as I said earlier, has a chance. Certain companies are quite excited about this. IBM and Ginni Rometty stood up at their user conference last year in Las Vegas in front of 65,000 people and said that IBM was going to bet the company on 3 technologies, cloud, AI, and blockchain. It's a pretty big deal. Then you've got other companies like, McKinsey talking about the fact that blockchain is the most important technology, second only to the internet itself in our lifetime. So there's definitely a lot of hype, but there's also definitely a lot of value in a digital ledger and in blockchain as a protocol and methodology for exchanging digital information. Where blockchain use cases are, where we think are kind of the most predominant areas, is certainly multiple parties sharing data. is a key component of blockchain. So when you're thinking about specific areas where blockchain could apply within your enterprise, think about where you have multiple parties that are sharing data. Also, multiple parties that are updating data, especially when the transactional exchange of data is time sensitive. Think of moving planning information between you and your manufacturing environment, especially if they're third-party manufacturers or CMs. Think about pricing. Think about areas where you really have a time sensitivity on order to cash, or on other areas where the critical nature of getting a response back from someone is very important. This is a great place where blockchain can be used. Think about where there's a requirement for verification. So not just getting an email that says, I commit to this, or getting a fax that says, I commit to this, but actually having a record in a digital ledger that allows you to be able to say, no, Mr. Supplier, or no, Mr. Customer, you actually committed to this on this date, and I have a record of it in the digital ledger. Intermediaries where they're adding complexity. There's a lot of work that's going on right now on the internet where intermediaries are being taken out of the equation. So look at the airline industry, look at the travel industry, look at a lot of other industries where we don't have intermediaries anymore. And think about your own business where you could potentially be disintermediated if you're not creating value between the parties that you're exchanging data with. Blockchain is a great place to be able to do that. And then, of course, there's another very big area, which is where transactions need to be interactive. So if you're going back and forth with a supplier saying, okay, I need 1,000 units by May 15th, and I'll be willing to pay you $2.50 a unit, there could be 30 iterations of that transaction back and forth. Again, another great place to be able to use blockchain as a method by which to exchange securely and with a history of these particular transactions. Different blockchain use cases that we're seeing interest in today, are in and around government and voting, which for this particular audience might not be that big of a deal. We're certainly seeing a lot of activity in the insurance industry, especially around multi-party contract exchanges and streamlining things like claims management, underwriting information, again, multi-parties, and the need to have validation and compliance. Then we've got banking, financial, and fintech, where you've got again, streamlining payment processing, minimizing audit complexity. Food and beverage, where you've got trade promotion settlements that are going on, improved food safety. Apparel is a very big area where, because of the number of vendors that you've got and the seasonal planning component of an apparel company is also really critical to be able to have blockchain, just because of the multi-parties and the validation that's needed. Point on this particular slide, and that I'd like for you to take away, is that in any enterprise, in any organization, there will be places where blockchain can be used, and specifically the Boardwalk blockchain platform, to help you build these applications to take advantage of a digital ledger and the blockchain solution. So one of the things that is always confusing to people is, what's the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain? And Bitcoin is a cyber currency. There's about 25 different cyber currencies that are being exchanged today in the world. And a Bitcoin, and the way in which a blockchain environment works for Bitcoin, is on what's called a fully distributed basis, which effectively means that there is no one that is in control. It is a totally autonomous environment by which you can, through a user interface, submit a request to buy or sell a particular value, and in this particular case, it's a Bitcoin. And then everyone gets a copy of that particular transaction through a public-private key exchange. And then once the transaction is consummated, then there is an independent third party known as a miner that comes on board and effectively validates the transaction. The key is that in a fully distributed environment like a Bitcoin, everyone has a copy of the transaction itself, so that it eliminates the potential of hacking, where you've got a central server that could be hacked. And in a distributed environment, you don't necessarily have that. In the enterprise, and this is specific back to Gartner, Gartner is absolutely a proponent in talking about the fact that the enterprise cannot necessarily manage their blockchain environment in what would be called a fully distributed mode, and that most of the blockchain environments for the enterprise should be in what's called a private permissioned blockchain, which effectively says to the enterprise, if you're going to pay for this and you're going to leverage this technology, you want to be the controlling party that effectively validates what trading partners can and cannot come on board. What can people actually see from a transactional standpoint with regard to this? How do you want to secure these transactions? Do you want to, comply with your internal security environment? How do you want to validate these transactions? Is it through various methods of validating the transactions, whether that's through code or whether that could be through algorithmic environment, or whether that could be what's called proof of time or proof of work? And all of these things need to be figured out. And all of the work that Boardwalk has done so far with quite a number of again, Fortune 500 customers today, has been to really focus on this private permissioned environment that allows our customer to effectively control the digital ledger and the blockchain environment. And this is, again, something that is extremely important for you to be thinking about. You do not want your mission-critical transactional information running in a fully distributed environment where you have no idea who's getting a copy of this information. You want to be able to control this in what's called a private permission blockchain, and that is exactly what Boardwalk offers. So why is blockchain important, right? This is the question that all of you should be asking, which is, okay, I get that blockchain is new. I get that there's this digital ledger that's kind of cool and not only secures all of the transactions, keeps a record of all the transactions, but also is, as an irrefutable transaction ID, so that I know that the transaction actually happened and was from that particular trading partner. But why is it going to affect me? What can I get of value? And I will say that if you look at most enterprises today, you guys have spent a lot of money on ERP, whether that's Oracle or SAP or JDA or what have you. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's hanging off of that, whether it's HR systems or Salesforce.com. But the net is that most enterprises today are still doing a lot of the core work in what we would call kind of a planning function, which is, okay, I'm planning for revenue, I'm planning for supply, I'm planning for demand. I need to exchange information with multiple parties in order to get to what is really going to happen. How much do I need to build? How much can I sell? All of these things that are outside of the core transactional systems of record. And quite frankly, many of those types of interchanges and exchanges between you and both internal people within your enterprise and external people with your enterprise is still done in these spreadsheet-based environments where you're emailing these spreadsheets around. And we all know that once you get 3 or 4 people involved or more in an email exchange, no one really has a historical component of how did we ever get to a value of 1,242 units in cell M21 because there's no history of how that cell has changed over time. So when we look at the best use cases around blockchain and specifically where Boardwalk can help, we like to look at a lot of those planning applications and a lot of the interchange that you have both internally and externally where there's a need to create a more efficient exchange of data, where the speed is important for you to be able to get a response back from that component manufacturer that says, I can't meet your demand, and allows you to go make a decision. So instead of waiting for 2 days before the production line kicks in for this new product, you actually know 3 weeks in advance that that particular component manufacturer can't meet the demand. That's about increased speed. And of course, making sure that you're reducing fraud, that you're also in compliance. And by having a record of all of these transactions on the digital ledger allows you to be able to do that. We have examples, and in fact, we're going to show you where very traditionally, if you had, let's say, a planning process that took you 6 weeks, call it a payroll planning, that we've been able to reduce that 6-week planning process down to 2 weeks, running on the Boardwalk digital ledger and the Boardwalk blockchain. And you have 100 people in a process trying to manage a plan, a seasonal plan, and if you can remove 4 weeks out of a 6-week process, not only is there a hard ROI that comes from that of cost savings, but there's also a strategic, what I would call soft ROI that comes from what is the value of having your plan done 4 weeks in advance versus waiting until the last minute. And all of that can be done. It really can be done very rapidly by deploying the Boardwalk blockchain and utilizing the digital ledger that allows you to be able to use this blockchain transactional environment to improve the speed and improve the way in which you do planning and or a lot of other exchanges of information where you have multi-parties involved. So this is an example of a blockchain ROI. We're about to get into the specific use cases here in a second. But this is an example of if you took a 6-week process and you were able to reduce it to 1 to 2 weeks, the value of that can be very significant of not only a 2 to 4% reduction in inventory, a 2 to 5% of IT budget savings, but also reducing the time that people have to spend on this manual data management, freeing up that time to allow them to go work on more strategic stuff. So how many times do we have issues where it's, where is that file? Where is that data? Where does that information reside? Let me go look at that. And we all get into meetings where we're arguing about the quality of the data as opposed to talking about what really needs to happen next, right? We're worried about, is the data right before we even make a decision? In blockchain and with Boardwalk, because it's a place to store all of the data in a secure manner, and because you've now got the data in a single place, you don't have to spend so much time going to chase that information because you know that the information is valid and everybody's looking at the same information, and now you can get to a quality decision faster. And this is why you take a look at this where you've got, say, 25 people involved in a $200 million company, and you can take a process from 6 weeks that used to take 6 weeks down to 1 or 2 weeks. You literally can save $650,000. So with regard to kind of building applications and actually getting these applications out, the normal amount of time that it takes for us or working with one of your partners, that would be like an IT partner, or working directly with your own IT staff, most applications that are built on the Boardwalk Enterprise blockchain take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. Can be a little bit longer if there's complex integration going on. It can be shorter if it's a fairly simplified process, but that's about how long it takes. So certainly your risk of getting a project done is greatly diminished when you've got such a quick time frame to be able to deliver. The Boardwalk Enterprise blockchain includes not only this entire patented shared digital ledger system that is controlled by you, but also the immutable address and value of the exchange of information and value. And it allows you to very quickly collaborate in a trusted and secure manner. Now, the other thing that I was going to tell you is that while I've been talking about blockchain as a protocol for the secure exchange of value and information, the second most important thing with regard to blockchain has to do with something that's called a smart contract. And Boardwalk in our enterprise blockchain stack includes this model in smart contract designer. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is a smart contract, and it's frankly kind of a stupid name, but it is what it is. A smart contract is nothing more than code that's written, if-then statements that are written that says, if this happens, go do that. Now, why is this important in blockchain? Why it's important in blockchain is that all of the information now, because this is going to be the new protocol for enterprise data exchange, because all of the data is on the blockchain, you actually now don't have to go search out data in different systems. And because of that, you can actually now write code against the information that allows you to be able to automate processes and become much more efficient. What's an example? Well, let's talk about invoice purchase order reconciliation. So if the purchase order is on the blockchain and validated, and then you get a ship notice that comes in that's on the blockchain and validated that the product was actually received, and then you get the invoice that comes in and it's on the blockchain and you know it's from your particular vendor because you're managing the security of all of this through the blockchain environment. You now can write code, or we can write code for you in the smart contract designer that effectively says if the invoice number matches and the PO number matches and the quantity matches and the vendor matches, then go ahead and pay this invoice. So instead of having 500 people in India chasing paper or Excel-based lists of invoices and POs to say, should we pay this vendor? In a blockchain environment, because all the data is there and it's secure, you can actually automate that process. Now, we all know that there's going to be exceptions, that not everything that comes into a system, especially blockchain, is going to be perfect, such as an invoice. But I will say that imagine what would happen to the processing speed and your order to cash if you were able to automate the invoice PO reconciliation system by 80% and only had 20% as errors or exceptions that then you could go off and work on, and it would be much easier to clear those exceptions because now you've got all of the data in the digital ledger, in the blockchain environment, that you can go back and say, oh, the PO number was off by 1 digit, let me fix that and move this transaction through. So these are examples of not only the value of blockchain as being a protocol and an environment for building multi-party transactional exchange environments, moving your world to a digital world, but the second thing is now that the secure transactions are in one central place, being able to really realize the value of writing code against that in this smart contract blockchain environment where you can automate these processes and reduce friction and reduce people in the environment. The other thing that's important and a little bit more unique to Boardwalk is that we also have this integration framework that allows you to be able to pull data in and out of the blockchain digital ledger to move information between transactional systems of record and the blockchain environment itself. And this, again, is very important, right? How many times do we have someone that's a demand planner that wishes that they could have in the column next to them a complete history of what the inventory has been or what the actual inventory is across the company. And this is something that we can do and line that up in the digital ledger. The way that Boardwalk works is that we have something called Boardwalk virtual machines, and these are the nodes that get installed at the end user sites that then communicate with the Boardwalk Enterprise blockchain digital ledger server that can either sit behind your firewall or can be hosted on your behalf by Boardwalk. The top left-hand corner represents what a spreadsheet view might look like. And then we also can manage this information in a web form environment as shown in the 2017 portfolio dashboard, or you can also manage the information in a mobile environment as represented down below on the left corner of the screen. The way that it simply works, and you'll see this in the demo, is that someone has a spreadsheet environment, in this particular example, that is access controlled, and it allows them to work offline in the spreadsheet, mature their data, and when they're ready to submit that data or share that data, they simply hit submit refresh. It connects down into the Boardwalk Enterprise blockchain and makes an insert into the digital ledger that they just actually submitted that information. So now you have a valid historical record of every single transaction, who did it and how they did it. And then if they were to come in the morning and say, what's changed with this data, they can hit refresh and they'll actually see changes coming in at the cell level as represented by the top right-hand corner of that cell that says 145,200 by the little red icon, with a pop-up that says this cell value has changed from 141 to 145.2. This is how people now would interact and exchange information with the blockchain environment. This view, which again can be either a web form view, an Excel view, or a mobile view, is in what we call the Boardwalk virtual machines, and they can install in less than 90 seconds out at any end user site to then give them access to the actual blockchain environment. Very rapid application development here, and giving a user the ability to more quickly adopt these transactions. The second thing is that the historical record, the digital ledger, can and actually shows you every change that's ever been made in this particular application or process. So if you wanted to say how many columns were added, how many rows were added, were formulas changed, were users added, show me how a cell of data has changed in time, you have that with one click going onto the digital ledger, the ability to absolutely see who has made what changes and have it with an irrefutable ID. Here's the first use case that we're talking about here, which would be in apparel. If you take a look at all of the information here in the middle, such as raw material costs or production costs, hurdle rates, or seasonal plans, all of those are actual planning processes that are run in this particular apparel manufacturer. And the green boxes are applications that have been put in place on the Boardwalk digital ledger. So we've got a lot of additional work to go, such as doing promotion stock level management, in-season demand fluctuation management, but all of that will eventually be done. And as we kind of knock off different planning and different applications within the environment to be able to solve these problems for this particular apparel manufacturer. It's important to note that the productivity savings on this has gone from 6 weeks to 2 weeks, where it would normally take them 6 weeks to produce a seasonal plan. It now takes them 2 weeks because they're running it on the Boardwalk blockchain environment. This is a use case for CPG electronics, where this particular company, we've built out, I think, 15 or 16 blockchain applications where they're managing things like back orders through the Boardwalk Enterprise blockchain. They're managing reseller operations. They're managing change requests and part forecasting and procurement inventory and vendor matrix. All of the stuff that isn't either managed in your existing ERP systems or had previously been managed in a spreadsheet environment. And once you move that to Boardwalk and move it to a blockchain environment, you can see this immense value that comes from digitally transforming these multi-party applications onto the blockchain and the value that comes from that. And again, it goes back to security, compliance, speed, information exchange, all of the things that come as value. This is a use case in insurance where we actually just went live with a particular application for a very large insurance company, top 5 in the world, where we're now doing policy management, workflow, and automatic renewal. So as a policy comes up for renewal and it's 120 days out, not only does the smart contract kick off an automatic notice that says to the broker and the underwriters and the loss people, hey, this policy is about to come up for renewal. You guys need to go do the following things, but it's tracking that entire workflow in the digital ledger with who submitted what data, what information is still pending, what information is needed in order to finish this renewal so that they can actually renew the business and make money versus not renewing it and being out ahead of the competition. And of course, off of the digital ledger, you can drive a bunch of reporting and fancy stuff showing you win rates and loss rates and all kinds of other things that you would think. Again, this particular application, which is managing, billions of dollars of risk in this particular insurance company, took about 10 weeks to build, start to finish, with multiple parties involved, including brokers, underwriters, loss people, and a host of other entities involved in the workflow. Last use case is a food and beverage use case. Very proud to be working with Coca-Cola. They're one of our long-term customers, and we actually built out a complete trade promotion optimization management system for them, where they're running about $7.9 billion of revenue through the Boardwalk trade promotion system, where they're managing 3.6 billion units of product through their trade promotion environment. We were able to significantly improve not only their trade promotion results, but also the speed by which they're actually able to deliver these trade promotion contracts out to their largest customers, thereby greatly improving the speed, they're much more competitive with the other beverage manufacturers because they're getting these trade promotion contracts in place faster. They also have much better information to understand what's selling, what's not selling, because all the information is sitting on the digital ledger. JB, I'm going to hand this off to you and let you go ahead and begin the demo, please.
All right, we're going to do a quick switch and move over to my machine. So everybody now should be seeing my user interface. And the example we're going to use today is running an example of a renewals process inside the Boardwalk digital ledger. And I think it's important to point out that this particular example shows information that may be applied to a particular use case for renewing premiums across different companies and with different insurers. But the digital ledger is designed to be able to work with really any data in the enterprise that supports multi-party exchanges, as Andy's been talking about. I'm starting inside of the Excel environment. As we've been talking about, it runs inside of the web UI, which we'll show you a little bit as part of the demo as well. And really the core IP is this notion of being able to manage a grid of information. And that grid of information can be accessed inside of course, what we would call the original digital ledger, which is Excel, but really any user interface that works with rows and columns of data which is also, by the way, how information is created inside the enterprise, coming in with transactional systems where it says, you know, who are the different companies that I'm working with and what are the different property lines and things like that. But you also see here that I'm leveraging some formula capabilities. So this is one of the nice things about this data environment, is that as a user, you know how to go in and write very simple formulas that provide information related to the business process to say, you know, what's the start date related to renewal date and everything else. And you're able to leverage any of this information that you have already today in a tabular environment or inside of a ledger, because the Boardwalk Enterprise blockchain understands positionality. So formulas, which are very powerful when executing against smart contracts, are able to be used directly without having to do any modifications to the data. And then you notice also that some information about the blockchain itself is coming in. And we'll talk a little bit about exactly what's going to the blockchain as we kind of go through the process. Now, one of the other things that we have set up is this notion of channels and access control. Because in the enterprise, we think it's very important that as people are interacting with the data, they will want to work with a shared ledger for the blockchain information, but they do not want to have their data accessible to other users on the blockchain. And within the Boardwalk digital ledger environment, that's accomplished very easily in kind of the same method that you would go in and say, hey, let me apply an auto filter to any one of these data elements and say, hey, I want this company only to see this, or I want this insurer only to see that. Well, as I switch over and I show you this access, this is only something that the administrator would see, but it says, you know, who are the different users that are interacting with this data and what should they see? And the roles that we've set up are this blockchain ACME, which is the main user running this process, portfolio company manager, which in this case is only seeing portfolio company A, the insurer, so for example, the insurer who's responsible for Alliance or their interaction with the ledger is going to be interacting and only seeing their data. And then there's also an auditor. And the ledger gives you the ability to add all of the data in the ledger and yet have it accessible through access control. So when people are interacting with the data, they only see specific sets of information. And this is unique to the Boardwalk data environment, in that you can have smart contract information that's being run against the ledger that says, hey, I want to take the renewal state equals completed, and I want to elevate that through a workflow consensus to say, this is the data that I want to have auditable and accessible on the common blockchain. All of the data transactions, and specifically only the cells that have changed, are committed to the blockchain, but you have a further level of elevation to the data to be able to say, take any one of these columns, and I want to be able to apply a filter against that to say, here's the data that I consider to be important or something that I might want to audit later as I go in and interact with the data on the blockchain. Also, you have reporting capabilities where the information can be summarized both inside of Excel and also in the browser, because all of those capabilities work as they do today. But from a user interaction point of view, as Andy mentioned, what happens is people do what we call submit and refresh. So right now I'm acting as ACME, and ACME sees everything, but I'm going to switch over to this user blockchain portco. And you remember blockchain portco only sees rows where portco A shows up. So although this is a shared digital ledger, the individual users on their virtual machines are only getting access to the data that they're allowed to have access to, which we believe is a critical part of any collaborative multi-party application between both internally and especially externally. And therefore, it's an important part of this capability from a blockchain perspective to be able to have that. And if I say, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to switch this one and say this one's completed, and you can see that some of the math is running here, and even formatting to say this one's no longer has days to renewal because it's completed. And I can say this was done early. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to say this one, instead of 194, is going to be 197. And as I do this, you can see the math working, you can see things doing updating, and I'm able to work offline. I don't have to necessarily be connected as I'm doing this work. But when I'm ready, I do need to be connected, and I click on submit. And what happens is you enter a comment or a transaction comment and say my update, and then it asks you to log in, and it can do single sign-on, it can do Active Directory, it can do anything. But it's now looking at the data inside this person's ledger, and it's finding only the cells that have changed, and it's committing those to the chain. And this is one of the unique things about the Boardwalk digital ledger data environment, is that you can have your WIP data and your transactional data interacting within the same ledger environment. But in the case of blockchain, what you're interested in is a transaction that says, hey, show me what's changed. And since our ledger, the Boardwalk ledger, already today only commits as an insert the cells that have changed, that data gets pushed to the blockchain. And then on top of that, we give the ability to elevate the smart contract to say, hey, take some of this, for example, the renewal state completed, and make that be the ones that I'm interested in focusing on from an audit perspective. But you can see here that, hashes were created as a result of both of those changes being made as I did the submit to the database. Now, equally, I can come in and say, oh, let me interact with this through a browser. So if I now say, hey, I'm going to be the insurer, and the insurer logs in, and they look at this renewal processing, then you can see I'm looking at the data in the browser, but only Alliance is showing up. Remember, we have the access control set up so that only Alliance is showing this particular change or this particular data in the browser. So if I come in and say, I'm going to change this to be 44, and then more changes, and then say submit this. And again, I'm just saying my updates. Then as I interact with this data, again, this is now being pushed to the ledger. It's now being captured as another change. And since this is shared between all the different users, if I now go back and I say refresh as this individual user where we started, which is the blockchain acting, then I'll see all these changes come into my local ledger. So as you can see here, here's this data value changed. Here's this data value changed. You can see these updates were done over here. All of these changes were done here. You can see changes to the update date. So this is automatically populated both inside of the ledger environment, but also inside the blockchain. And then you can select any one of the cells and say, wow, I don't remember this particular value being 127,000. I'd like to understand, how many times has this changed and who's changed it? So by simply clicking on any one of the cells, you're able to see the provenance of the data as it's matured over time. So not only are you able to see all the WIP and transactional data and the provenance of it, but you also have an ability to look at the blockchain itself and say, does this data match with the hash that was created as of this time? Well, how does that work? Well, so let's go back to the browser, and I'm going to log out now, and I'm going to log in as the auditor. And the auditor is going to go ahead and take a look at the blockchain. Now, you'll notice that inside of the ledger itself, I'm seeing all of the blockchain transactions, but in this case, this is the one that I've considered from a smart contract perspective to be important for this particular process, because this is the shared state of the data that everybody's agreed to. And this is the issue that Andy was talking about, right? Is that people go through a level of collaboration, but there's no provenance built into a traditional relational database environment. All of that has to be built separately, and you have to have separate transaction logs in order to track the changes. And then you still don't have an environment to do any if-then, because it's not a naturally versioning system. That's what the Boardwalk patent is this ability to go in and say, hey, I want to understand how data has changed over time. And now with the blockchain hashing capability, I can say, I want to take a look at a particular data row and verify that the current state of the ledger matches the hash that's been created in the blockchain. So it gives you this ability to say, if this information changes over time, I want to be able to ensure that I know exactly what's changed and what has not changed. And you can see this AXA and the 9550. So if I come back and I say, okay, well, let's change this. Now, in this case, typically, this would be locked down. Once this is set to renewal state completed, you wouldn't be able to change this. But just for the purposes of demo, we want to be able to show, how does something change? So if I say, let's update this, do another submit, and push this out again to the ledger as the portfolio company, and also going out to the blockchain itself, you'll be able to see that this data has changed. And then as you go through and you say, hey, I need to be able to check this and see if this has been validated. If I say, refresh this, and then I come back and I look at the same row that I had before, and I say, you know, is this data accurate? Is this showing exactly what is in the blockchain? And when I click on this, it shows you that this data is not valid. And what we're doing is we're leveraging this crypto capability of this hash that says at any point of the data or at any point of your business process lifecycle, you'd like to be able to look at information and say, has this matched? Do I understand what the state of the data was? And by the way, this state of the data, as Andy talked about, can execute additional smart contract actions like saying, okay, this is now approved, so go ahead and submit this purchase order out to be able to generate the renewal with this particular company as they've gone through and done the work. And all of this is happening because in the background, what's happening is the Boardwalk digital ledger is evolving through time. And this is what is unique to the IP that we provide as part of our database technology, is this ledger where as people make changes, everything that's inserted in the ledger is just an update with just, or an insert with just the cells. And you can see we've done a lot of changes over the last week, so this is generating a big report. But it'll show you that as we go through time, you know, all of the cells that have been updated as we go through, and all of them have immutable transaction IDs that show the provenance of the data as it's moved through time. And now it has this additional capability such that you now have the hash associated with the data as well. So you have a complete collaboration environment as well as a secure, audible, and shared digital ledger.
Right. So this is Andy, JB. Let's keep this up for a moment because there's some questions that have come in that I think would be great to have this visual. But one of the examples, everyone, of why the digital ledger is important is that there was a kind of a famous thing that happened maybe a few months ago where a VP at Walmart said, I would like everyone on my team to tell me where this particular mango came from. He went to one of the Walmart stores, picked a mango off the shelf, and said, where did this mango came from? And it took them something like 7 weeks to get the answer of where the mango came from. Now, in the world of food safety, in the world of products where we want to be able to track things, call it drugs, anything along those lines, if you have this information running on the digital ledger and you've got a history of the transaction, you can go back and absolutely find out where that mango came from and probably find out where that mango came from in 3 or 4 clicks because all of the data is sitting on the digital ledger and validated with the hash. So JB, walk us through kind of how that happens, because we're getting some questions coming in from the audience around why do I need this blockchain environment versus why couldn't I just do this with a straight database?
Well, and I think that comes back to the point I was talking about before, is that a traditional relational database is not necessarily structured to handle a grid-based set of information that has inserts over time with only the cells that have changed, 1. 2, as the data comes in, it's necessary as you're doing the transaction to be able to do this if-then, which means the data value is coming in and it's going from 194,000 to 197,000. Well, you need to have a state environment in order to store that information as it comes in, and to the Boardwalk digital ledger environment, unlike a key value pair or in a traditional relational database. And obviously with a relational database, if you write enough code, you can do similar things, but then you have to go through the whole issue of, well, how do I create the tables? How do I find the fields? How do I do the interaction with the logic and all those other things that we've been working with for the last 10 years? But for the purposes of the blockchain, if it doesn't naturally understand time and naturally understand versioning and support this accessibility and access control, then it's difficult to stand up something that works well within the context of a blockchain application. Correct. At least that's the feedback we've been getting from our clients.
Right. So if you then were to take a look at the difference between building an application like this on using a traditional database and traditional methods versus building it on the Boardwalk blockchain platform, having the transactional information there hashed, what's the difference in time that it would take for this particular application that you've just demoed, that just went live with a major insurance carrier? How long did that take versus what would it have taken them if they were to build it from scratch?
Yeah, and Andy, that's a great question. We get it all the time, and I think there's two answers to that. One is, in general, what we're able to do in 6 weeks, with other applications it takes 6 months. And then secondly, we're able to show a working and stood up data environment very quickly, which gives, for that same amount of time, not only is it going to be shorter, but typically when we do an engagement, it's 6 weeks, maybe it goes to 8 weeks, but that's because the client's saying, wow, I'm able to get access to my data much sooner. Whereas in other systems, you have to wait until the entire application environment is built before you can do anything. So we tend to do a lot of iterations as well as being much quicker and standing up a data environment.
Correct. And there was a question that came about the Boardwalk virtual machines and the different environments that you can use as a Boardwalk virtual machine to connect into the Boardwalk digital ledger, and how easy is it to install a Boardwalk virtual machine?
It's a natural part or an included part of Excel, so we leverage the Excel capability on the desktop with a small addition to the Excel file itself that allows the interaction with the virtual machine with the digital ledger. And then you saw me doing the interaction inside the browser, where, again, that's just part of a natural browser landing page that you make accessible. And then you also can run it in a mobile environment, either within a browser or in an application on the mobile device if that's of interest.
Correct. Talk about another question that's come in has to do with work in process. And should all of that work in process be, or WIP, be put on the blockchain, or can you run work in process in an outside environment and then just put certain things on the blockchain? What's the kind of the Boardwalk's standard suggestion for this?
Well, our suggestion is that all transactions should be on the blockchain. And the reason we talk about that is that, I mean, using the example that you talked about with the Mango, and even in this particular example, you can see the renewal state completed is the one that we've elevated up to the audit level for the transaction or for the blockchain. But you equally want to be able to look at anything that's done through WIP, and you want to have confidence on that exchange of data and be able to verify that what that data was as of that time has not been changed. And in a blockchain environment, you're able, with the hash, you're able to go in and say, hey, here's the data state that I see. Let me rerun this crypto algorithm and see what hash is generated, just like I did in that validation. And it'll immediately tell you, has anything been changed?
Correct.
So now you have confidence in your data.
So one of the most important things that, and why everything needs to be hashed, is that in the Mango example, if you said, oh, I don't care about the logistics component of this, let that be offline WIP. But all of a sudden, if you did include that on the blockchain and you had the transactions there, you would be able to see that in a logistics handoff between logistics company A and B, there was a 12-day delay where stuff was sitting on the dock improperly, and there may have caused the problem with that particular, Mango. And so if that wasn't on the blockchain and it wasn't part of the overall WIP that's being managed on the chain, you would have never known that unless someone told you, oh, by the way, this was sitting on the dock improperly for 12 days.
Yep.
Right. And so that's the reason why that should occur and why everything should be on the blockchain.
And let's just touch on one more question, and then we got to switch to the last slide, because there was a question that said, hey, Excel has limitations from a data perspective. And it's important to note that Excel is just a user interface here. I mean, this is actually the ledger running in the Boardwalk server environment. And when you saw me do the demo, you remember I went in and I said, hey, just show me company A. or just show Insurance Alliance only their data. The Boardwalk digital ledger blockchain data environment works exactly the same way. When you log in, it'll say, hey, there's 1 million rows on the server, but this person should only see 10,000 because that's all they're supposed to work on.
Right.
So everything's dynamically sized and taken care of as part of the runtime process.
So if you were to take a look, JB, at all of the Excel-based processes that are running within an enterprise, and if we were really honest about that and really looked at it, you would see that there's a tremendous amount, and many of those are excellent examples of where you can create immediate value running on the Boardwalk blockchain. However, we can utilize a web form or a mobile environment as the UI if the use case is more focused on a web form. And by the way, you can interoperate with those 3 different types of UIs between different types of users. So let's, as we kind of finish here, let's talk about the benefits. So, why is it that you need to deploy a blockchain today? Well, first of all, you're probably having your VPs or your CIOs or CEOs saying, hey, what are we doing with regard to blockchain? And I would say that Boardwalk is a great place for you to be able to come and say, geez, they've already got, 24 of the Fortune 500 as customers today. They know what they're doing. They've had many, many, many successful deployments. They're, been around a long, long time. Let's go work with Boardwalk to deliver our first blockchain implementation. And what this really does is this helps in reducing cycle time. And that, to me, is the key. Think strategically if you were able to take a particular process that used to take 6 weeks and move it down to 2. It's huge. Think about the elimination of data errors. Think about improved margins that you can see. And we've got ROI and case studies that we can provide you that will show you all of these things. And then, of course, applying the smart contract piece of this to not only just workflow, but other things that are running within the blockchain are really important. And then, of course, the whole issue around digital transformation. Enterprises are stuck, JB. They're stuck with old ERP. They're stuck with stuff hanging off there. And they're stuck with all of these companies, all of these people that are still doing mission critical process work in Excel. And that needs to be moved to the blockchain and into a digital environment. There is tremendous value that can happen for this, and it is much faster to deploy than you think. So as we conclude, we at Boardwalk, obviously, we really would like to earn your business. We'd be honored to work with you. We do these webinars not only from an educational standpoint, but also to try and get you excited about potentially working with Boardwalk. I'm the CEO. I'm here heart in hand saying, come talk to us. We want to work with you. We'll set up a no-cost custom demo for you. We'll do use case evaluations if you're thinking about using blockchain for the first time. And we're really great people to work with. So send us an email at info@boardwalktech.com if you want to talk more about this. And again, we're not hard selling organization. If you just want to have a conversation, great. If you want to learn more, great. Give us a shot. Let us talk to you. We really know what we're doing with regard to blockchain, and we'd be sincerely honored to work with you. So JB, thank you for a terrific demo. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending this webinar.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say we got a boatload of questions. We will answer all your questions. You will receive an email from us. So hang in there. We'll send it out as soon as possible.
Thank you, everyone, very much for attending the Boardwalk Blockchain webinar. All the best.